years since the Taoiseach stood up in here and apologised to the women of the Magdalene laundries. I think there are a lot of us who'd remember that day, the hope that was there, the good spirits of the women in the gallery, knowing and understanding that it wasn't a case that the wrong that had been carried out against them would be righted. But at least there had been an acknowledgement by this state that it shouldn't have happened. And from then on, that respect and dignity that was deserved of them would be delivered. And, you know, some of the points made by the Minister yesterday about access to the scheme, about getting the lump sums so that it's proved smoothly enough and all the rest of it is probably broadly true. And it has gone some way to make redress. But isn't that the point, really? It's only gone some way. It's the absolute bare minimum that the state has been dragged out, really, to these women. It's not even human rights compliant. And even that bare minimum is not being delivered. And I think that's an insult to those women, and I think it's an insult to people all over this country. Now, I'd like to take issue with the fact that the Minister isn't here. No disrespect to yourself, Minister, whatsoever. But these are the opening slots on a vital issue, and the Minister hasn't dignified the chamber with her presence for them. I would also take issue, in fact, with the tone and content of some of her remarks yesterday, which I don't feel were accurate. I think they were a little bit lopsided. I think they attempted to maybe give a sanitised version of what actually happened, and in doing that, I think it is derogatory to the victims and the survivors of these institutions. The Minister listed a broad range of circumstances in which women ended up in the Magdalene laundry. She was, of course, accurate in that, referring to people who had nowhere else to go, people who were involved in family disputes, disabled people, that it wasn't all unmarried mothers or anything like that, all of which was true. She tried to say that, you know, we shouldn't judge these institutions by today's standards. I have a huge problem with that, because that is like saying, well, it went on, they were different times, they didn't know any better. They did know any better. And a lot of people knew what was going on there. And it's not good enough to say, well, sure, everybody knew. And if everybody knew and it was different times, well, sure, nobody is responsible. People have to be held responsible for what went on. And it's not just me saying that. The United Nations Human Rights Committee very forcefully made those points as well. And I think the fundamental mistake that the Minister made yesterday was by relying on the McAleese report, putting that out there as the historical version of what went on, when everybody knows that it's a limited report that only looked into the state's involvement in the Magdalene laundries. It didn't investigate any allegations of abuse, and therefore no perpetrators could be brought to account or anything like that. It's a very, very lopsided version of events. And to maybe remind the Minister and the other Minister when she comes back, because she was in attendance at the UN Human Rights Committee, and I'll just read what the committee had to say about Ireland in this regard in relation to the institutional abuse of women and children. And the committee expresses concern at the lack of prompt, independent, thorough and effective investigations into all the allegations of abuse, mistreatment or neglect of women and children in the Magdalene laundries, children's institutions and mother and baby homes. It regrets the failure to identify all perpetrators of the violations that occurred, the low number of prosecutions, and the failure to provide full and effective remedies to the victims, and citing that as a breach of Article 2, 6 and 7 of the Convention. And it then goes on in bold to say the State Party should conduct prompt, independent and thorough investigations into all allegations of abuse in the Magdalene laundries, children's institutions and mother and baby homes, prosecute and punish the perpetrators with penalties equal to the gravity of the offence, and ensure that all victims obtain an effective remedy, including appropriate compensation, restitution, rehabilitation and measures of satisfaction. And here we are today with an incredibly pale shadow of what the UN Human Rights Committee asked Ireland to do. Now, I know this only deals with an aspect of the areas, but it's the government's lack of attention to the other aspects that is causing concern. The Minister yesterday made the point, well, I was sort of like saying that the advocacy group, she didn't name them, but I assume she was meaning Justice for Magdalene's, were somehow operating under a misimpression and banging a drum that wasn't there, that this bill was giving them everything that Quirk said they were entitled to in terms of their medical provision. Now, it's quite clear, as Deputy MacDonald said, that there are huge issues here that would show that that is not the case. It is true that the card that is being envisaged here is better than your normal medical card, and that access to services are provided. But it's the nature of that access that is hugely different in this scheme as it was in the HAA payment card, because people could basically, under that card, get access to any service they liked anywhere without restrictions. All of these provisions seem to have barriers, and it's not just this group saying it. The National Women's Council, the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, Amnesty International are all on record as this. These people have legal people working with them. They are capable of reading a piece of legislation. They're not known for exaggerated claims, so one would have to take their concerns with grave seriousness in this regard, and I certainly do. I think the points that have been made, that these women effectively signed a waiver that they wouldn't take action against the state in return for the full package, that is going to be absolutely undermined now, because the full package would not appear to being delivered in this scheme. I absolutely echo the points made about full pension rights being given to these women. They should be treated as if they had full pension contributions. Some of these women were engaged in basically slave labour, earning substantial amounts of money for the laundries. The state was a huge beneficiary as well. They are entitled to the fruits of that labour, and the state has not agreed to backdate those payments as they should, in my opinion. I think the points made about the nursing home support, but particularly the need for liaison officers, is also very, very valid and well made. And it's not just that it's the right thing to do, it's also the legal requirement for us to do in order for us to be human rights compliant. I mean, Mark Kelly from the ICCL did make the point that Article 14 of the United Nations Convention Against Torture requires people to be able to obtain redress and benefit, enforceable right to fair and adequate compensation, and so on. That absolutely has to be provided, and it hasn't been. And I think, in fairness, Colin O'Gorman spelt it out even better when he said that, we have to remind the government that the women and girls in these institutions experienced a range of human rights abuses, including inhuman and degrading treatment, arbitrary deprivation of liberty, forced labour. We call on the government to live up to its obligations under the Quirk scheme. It's not a lot to ask for what was done to these women, and I'm frankly shocked that we even have to be here. I'm particularly shocked that there's a sort of what would appear to be a game being played, where the Minister is saying one thing, giving the illusion that what Justice Quirk was talking about was being delivered. But the reality would seem to be quite different. And I think that is clearly far from what we should be doing. I just, in the last minute that I have, Count Corl, I was going to read an email that I got from a woman involved. She wasn't in a Magdalene laundry, but a mother and baby home. But I think she summed up very well what this country had done to people like her. And I think it is a reminder to the Minister and the government about why this scheme is on the table in the first place. And her email was titled Unmarried, Unwanted, Unheard. And she went on to say about being a survivor of the culture, the shame, the fear and the grief. She said it was an insidious control in this state that was designed to bring us to heel. Because we were female, men were allowed to rape and run, and worse, if they stood by you, you could pay for the rest of your life in servitude. The woman went on to talk about her own experiences, how she got on with her own life. There's people at the back of this, and I really think it's not good enough that we would give them any added misery by dragging our heels on what are their entitlements, not even the bare minimum that we're looking for. And I would appeal and echo the points for the Minister to revise the scheme as it stands.